What is up, eternally disappointed of the world? It is the morning after UFC 295, and for those of you who like violence and quick fights, last night was exactly what you wanted. So we're just going to get right to it and then go over a little bit of the UFC announcements from earlier this week. So UFC 295, it was an interesting turn of events, I guess would be the right way to say it. I think what the UFC had in mind and what actually happened aren't exactly the same thing, but I think the UFC is still happy. And what I mean by that is usually when the UFC goes to a certain area, they want to showcase fighters from that area or close to there. So, for instance, when you see a show in England, it's going to be a favorable matchup for most of the British fighters, the English fighters, or people that are just in that region. You go to Brazil, they're going to want to showcase the Brazilians and stuff like that. So when the main event kicked off last night, you had the first two fights were the local or close to local guys ended up coming out on the short end. So Pat Sabatini ends up losing to Diego Lopez. Diego Lopez is really good. He's going to be really dangerous for that division. He reminds me a little bit of Jair Rodriguez and Charles Oliveira. So he quickly finished Sabatini. I think Sabatini's from Philly. Obviously, Philly and New York don't get along sports-wise, but it's easy to support a guy from Philly fighting in New York. So I think the UFC was a little taken by that, but Diego Lopez is for real. Same with Frivola, and I don't know. It looks like Benoit Saint Denis, but I think it's pronounced Benoit Saint Denis. And he looked amazing. When that fight first started, I thought Benoit Saint Denis' energy was a little bit too low. The way Sandhagen said he started his fight with Aljamain Sterling, where Sterling was just in the moment a little bit more than him. And I thought Saint Denis wasn't quite in the moment as Frivola. Frivola comes from a good gym. Those guys are always ready. And Saint Denis was just like stoic. I thought mistook it for not having the energy in the moment, and I was wrong on that, and he had a brutal finish to Frivola. I thought that the UFC hid Mackenzie Dern from a lot of real competition for a long time because I thought that they looked at her as somebody who they could make a lot of money off of because of her reputation in the jiu-jitsu world and the way that she presents herself. And one of the things I thought they did was they kept her away from Jessica Andrade while Andrade was in her prime. I thought coming into this fight, this was a terrible stylistic matchup for Andrade. And you have to look at her. She lost to Erin Blanchfield, who's a big physical grappler. She lost to, I don't know how you say her name completely, but the last two letters are XI. And then she lost to Tatiana Suarez, a big grappler. And Mackenzie Dern is a big grappler. And Andrade wasn't having any of that. So she looked really impressive in this fight, almost like she turned back the clock. You could tell Mackenzie Dern wasn't doing that well, not training with Jason Perillo. So she's going to go back and make adjustments off that. She's still young. It's hard to believe Andrade is only 32. I definitely thought she was much older. She's been in the UFC for a long time. She's fought all the way up at 135, and she's a small strawweight. That's the crazy thing. But good on her for that knockout, which leads us to the two main fights. Aspinall and Pavlovich. I called this one. I thought the speed would be the difference. Pavlovich doesn't keep a tight guard and absorbs punches because he knows he has power and he just needs to land. He did land and then wasn't able to capitalize on it, and Aspinall was. The speed was the difference. And when you have 260-pound men, if one lands, it's going to be over. So I've never been super impressed with Aspinall until last night. I now look at Aspinall as a guy that could compete with John Jones. He looked like physically different than I've seen him before. But yeah, it was just that one kind of. I thought Aspinall was going to win, but I didn't think it would be like that. I thought it would be over the course of time or mixing in some takedowns and some clinch work to tire out Pavlovich, and he ate one, took it, and then waited for his time and landed a couple that weren't even on the button. They were more on the top of the head, and still did the work for him. So good for him. And I'll be honest, like, he seems like a really nice guy. It's cool that his dad has trained him pretty much his whole life. I've been training my son his whole life, and he's not gonna be a pro fighter or anything, but it's still very rewarding as a parent to watch your kids succeed. The main event, Prochazka, I actually got this one wrong. I thought Prochazka would end up winning this fight. Kind of doing what he did in the first round with some takedowns. I thought he was going to wear down Peredo on the ground. The crazy thing about this fight is I didn't see Prochazka not being prepared for calf kicks. He seemed to be very surprised with those first few calf kicks. He started to try to defend them, but he wasn't fighting out of his southpaw stance enough, and he just got into a firefight with the wrong guy. Kind of the Pavlovich Aspinall thing too. Like, there's just some guys you don't get in firefights with, and both of these guys are kind of that person. So it was going to be a wild fight. The thing about Alex Pereira is he fights at a very slow pace, so Prochazka didn't need to push it the way he did. But he had some good moments. He had a nice takedown on the first. He got some nice work on the ground. I still think Alex won the first round because he was causing more damage, but you could make an argument for Jiri getting the first round. And then in the second, Alex found the shot. I don't think it was a bad stoppage. I think that Jiri was kind of going unconscious as he fell to his back, because you could watch his neck just drop like this. It happens. It's good to see that they're both in okay spirits. I think even Jiri said something that it was a good stoppage, so no argument here. And now it's Jamal Hill against Alex Pereira for the title. Jamal Hill needs to shut the fuck up on TV. Like, the dude just won. You've never fought him, and you're sitting here talking shit. Like, maybe you shouldn't have got injured then. You know, if you're gonna like try to shit on a dude winning just to get yourself like hopefully in the title, like, I think that's ticky tack, especially when you're the one that had to pull out of a fight. So we kind of don't want to hear any of that. It's going to be a banger of a fight anyway. It's going to happen no matter what. It's actually more exciting to think about than the Jiri fight, in my opinion, because I don't think Hill is going to be looking for takedowns. Maybe until he gets calf kicked, though. So overall, it was a really awesome event. I'm sure it set a record for the least amount of pay-per-view fight time because of how quick the fights ended. Like I said, I don't think the UFC was planning on having Frivola and Sabatini both lose, but I'm sure they were happy with it either way because a lot of eyes went on Saint Denis and Diego Lopez, and those guys are going to be making some noise coming up in the future. Congratulations to everybody. And I saw something today. I was thinking about this last night, like, man, so many good fights and so many good finishes. I was wondering if Dana was going to hand out some extra money, and he ended up giving 7 people $50,000 bonuses. So well-deserved. Congratulations to them, and congratulations on a pay-per-view event it was better than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be good, but not this good. So good job on that. Up next, we've got the big announcements from this week for the UFC. The three title fights that they've announced. Strickland and Duplessis. That's the first one. I think that's the right call. I don't think Khamzat earned a title shot with the victory over Usman because he didn't look that dominant. He did say he got injured after the first round. But when you don't look that dominant against a guy that just came up from welterweight on 2 weeks' notice, I don't think that is deserving of a title shot. I think Khamzat should probably fight Costa or somebody else, maybe even Whitaker. And Duplessis deserved that title shot by finishing Whitaker. That'll be an interesting clash of styles for sure. And I'm excited to see that one. The next one was Volkanovski and Ilia Topuria. When I first saw Ilia fight, maybe 2 or 3 fights, like I saw one fight of his, I went back and watched a few. I thought Ilia was going to be the guy that dethrones Volkanovski. He's really good. He's really young. He still makes some mistakes. He believes a lot in his power and sometimes will put a little more heat on punches and take away a little bit of the technique. So I think that's one of his downfalls. When Volkanovski beat Jair Rodriguez, it was right after Ilia had fought Josh Emmett. And Ilia's victory over Emmett wasn't as impressive as Volkanovski beating Jair Rodriguez, just the way that the fights went down. So I initially said, I think Topuria will win against Volkanovski the second time they fight. I think Volk will beat him, and in a year or two they'll rematch, and that'll be Topuria taking the title from him. The same way Cejudo when he finally beat Mighty Mouse. After the Makhachev fight, I can see why people would have reservations about that and maybe think it's Ilya's time. I still favor Volk, but not as much. I don't take anything away from Volk because of the Makhachev fight. He took it on short notice. He had to fly in a large amount of time zones across the world. And you could tell when he went out there, he had the intentions of being aggressive and getting in Makhachev's face. And he just wasn't able to. You could tell he was off a little bit, which happens when you're fighting in a very far time zone and you're not crisp from a camp. And you could see everything, his timing was just a little off, and that's why his aggression was like forward, backwards. And I don't think Ilya is catching Volkanovski with a head kick. I do think, though, that it will make this fight a little bit closer than maybe it would have been. So I'm very curious to see how it plays out. It sucks for me because if Volkanovski is my favorite fighter right now, Topuria is my second favorite fighter. So it kind of sucks that I have to watch both of these guys fight. That being said, it's going to be a super slugfest. And then the last fight they announced for March was O'Malley fighting Chito Vera. I think this is fucking garbage. The reason I think it's garbage is because I think Merab and Sandhagen both deserve title shots before Chito does, especially because Chito was beaten by Sandhagen not too long ago. This is the UFC PR machine trying to keep O'Malley the champion because they can make money off of him. They initially gave O'Malley the Chito matchup in 2020, assuming that it would be an easy victory for O'Malley, and it wasn't. This is why it's not. O'Malley fights at a certain pace, but so does Chito. And the people that give Vera problems are people that can disrupt his pace. Somebody like Sandhagen, who is constantly moving and constantly throwing things at you, even with no intention of causing damage. He's just throwing things out there to keep you guessing. And then when he can see that you're just guessed out, that's when he cracks you and then goes back to making you guess. The people that Vera has success against are the people that he can control the pace. And some people might say, well, he beat Dominic Cruz, and Dominic Cruz has a chaotic figure eight style. Dominic Cruz isn't the same guy he was before he fought Cody Garbrandt. Before he fought Garbrandt, his speed was different and his timing was different. And in the Garbrandt fight, he looked genuinely slower. And I think that was the big difference in their fight. So when Vera was fighting Dominic Cruz, I didn't look at that. Cruz was trying to move, but he looked like he was a little bit in wet sand or a little bit of like thick mud. Not super slow, but slow enough that you could tell that Chito didn't have to push the pace. And then as soon as Chito cracked him once, you could see Chito could just sit there at the edge of the pocket, pushing Cruz back against the fence and just wait. And, I'm not going to be faked out by any of this stuff, and then blast him. So when you look back at the first fight between Vera and O'Malley was having success early with hard low kicks because both of them have very long legs. And the fight was going at such a slow pace that all of a sudden Vera started to have success, got a couple kicks in, and then whatever happened with the injury, we don't even know how it happened with O'Malley because everyone has conflicting stories about when this injury took place. Regardless, O'Malley is fighting at Chito's pace. Chito finally got his timing and was able to, the first 2 minutes of the fight and the second minute and a half or 2 minutes, you could see Chito kind of figure things out. He wasn't biting on as many feints. Once again, this is years ago. These guys are going to be different fighters, but they still fight in the same way. They have different skill sets, but they still like to go at the same pace. And the problem is O'Malley is going to be fighting at a pace that Chito likes. So I think it's a tough stylistic matchup. The other option is give O'Malley Merab, which the UFC doesn't want Merab to be champion. He has a very unfan-friendly style. Plus, he's annoying. or you give him Sandhagen, who's a horrible matchup for O'Malley. O'Malley is a big bantamweight. Sandhagen is an enormous bantamweight. Sandhagen's striking is a little more dynamic and a little bit better, and he can also put your lights out with one shot. So I think the UFC is avoiding giving O'Malley Sandhagen because it's such a bad matchup for him. So they give him Vera thinking it's a good matchup, and I don't think Vera is. That being said, I think it'll go to a decision and O'Malley will somehow pull it out. Regardless, I'm curious to see how it is because it's always fun when two people with those personalities meet in the cage to see how it ends. But those were the three big fight announcements we had this week. Two of them I agree with. Like I said, the O'Malley-Vera one, I think Vera needs a couple more victories to get a title shot, but O'Malley's pulling the strings or the UFC's pulling their PR to keep O'Malley the champion. Just like the way they did it with McGregor. And if Paddy Pimblett ever gets decent skills, they'll do the same thing with him. So, regardless, the UFC had a great show last night. They're going to have a great show in a couple of weeks. And then the 3 pay-per-views to kick off the new year are dynamite as well. So, it hasn't been a better time in the world to be a fight fan right now. And don't let any of these old school people that think that Pride was the way it should have been or won or anything like that. Like, MMA is looking really good right now. It's something that I enjoy being in the heart of, or not quite as much as I used to be, but it's still good to be on the ride anyway. So it's Sunday. The Patriots and Colts are going at it right now. Last time I checked, it was 7-3. And we'll get back to it with how football goes today. Looking forward to Buffalo trying to figure something out against Denver on Monday. We'll hear about it on Tuesday. Till next time, stay frosty, motherfuckers.